So when I got cut off in the last video, I was talking about the foreground background reversal on this one, and then this one is equally as good. You could make an argument for almost any of the colors being the background on this, but especially black and red and white. This one, if this blue would have came out further, I think it would have even made a stronger argument for blue possibly being the background, because then it could just be this shape put on top. I talked about earlier this one, if they would have went all the way out with the green and the black up here. So why is this important, this foreground background reversal? Well, it turns out that it's a way to really create interest in a design, and especially in a logo. It can give you a big bang for the buck for some incredible visual interest. So pause the video here and see if you can think of some logos that are out there that you know of, that you've seen, that have foreground background reversal going on, and I'll bring up a couple examples. So here's a nice example. Is black marks on top of the white type, or is the white type made up of a bunch of, you can imagine, like white pieces of tape? Most talked about logos and graphic design is the way FedEx redesigned, they either redesigned the X or the E, but the idea was they wanted the perfect alignment here so that in the negative space here they could trap the arrow, which is so appropriate because you think of an arrow being fast, FedEx Express, super fast delivery. So it's not only a visual interest, it's also a conceptual design. And some more historic type designs, not graphic design, is the face vase. Are you looking at two faces coming together, or are you seeing a vase trapped between? Granddaddy of them all would be the yin-yang symbol, especially when you look at it on a different colored background, because then you can say, well, was this created on a black circle and then the white shapes were cut out, or was it a white circle and the other shapes were cut out? We've mostly focused on the symmetrical composition, composition number one. Composition number two, everything that we just talked about applies to it, except, and this is the most significant thing, that not in any way should it be symmetrical. And I'm going to explain and show some examples, but it is really easy to accidentally make this composition symmetrical. So you constantly want to check as you go. So let's say you've got your 12 by 12, which is going to end up being the very back piece on your composition. You've got a few other pieces cut out here. And so you just get started. Place this one here, and you think, okay, well, now I want to balance this out. So you go, well, it can't be symmetrical, so I've got a square here. So this would definitely be wrong if I put another square over here on the opposite side. So you say, all right, well, I won't do that. I'll put a circle instead. Well, a couple things here. One, we talked about implied symmetry. So we don't even want implied symmetry across this, but not only this, but any other point on anywhere on this asymmetrical composition. So basically what I'm doing right now is showing you bad examples. So you say, all right, well, I could put this here, and then I put this here, but oh no, it is now basically implied symmetry across this axis. So that's no good. And you say, well, what if I put this over here and this over here? Well, now you have symmetry, not perfect symmetry, but implied symmetry across here. So you do not want any implied symmetry on here whatsoever. So now you can see why it's such a challenge. Also keep in mind that when you do kind of this equal distribution on a solid background, you end up without any foreground background reversal. So basically what you want to do is carry this around in your head, But also take your ruler and physically put it across your composition as you're doing it, following all of these axes, and not only perfect like that, but even move it off center a little bit just to see that you're not having the tendency. So what I'll do is I'll show you compositions that are on this page, and we'll take this grid with us and we'll show which ones are really, above and beyond as far as not having any hints of symmetry, and areas where one or more could even be better. If we look across any of these axes on this one, it is pretty darn solid. We don't start to see too much. Now we do have this line here that runs all the way through, and the circle feels a little bit symmetrical across that line, but luckily the circle is cropped off here, and other than that there's not too many implied things going across that line, so still extremely successful. Okay, and on this one, same thing, very successful overall. We do notice that there's some just implied symmetry because this ball or this circle is right on the axis, and this one too, but if you follow it down, not anything else really happening this way. Maybe a little bit of this circle, but luckily it's off axis with the other one. So again, if you just keep doing this through your work and evaluate it, and just make sure that there's not too much, and just watch for the pitfalls of putting things right on a perfect axis like where we started with this, because those will be the most noticeable ones. On this one, just some subtle hints, like if we look at this diagonal here, there's roughly the same amount of what I'll call the guitar on both sides. But luckily the circle's not on that exact same axis. So yeah, all three of these are quite successful, but hopefully that gives you an idea of the pitfalls that can go wrong if you really nitpick your work. Is the best way to not end up with something that's real obvious to me when I grade it, and you'll learn the most from it, because when you have no symmetry, implied symmetry, any kind of symmetry on the asymmetrical, it's much more difficult to balance it, and you will get the most out of doing the project. Composition 1 and 2, so the symmetrical and asymmetrical, must look like a set, meaning that they're made to be seen together. The easiest way to really accomplish that is sticking with the same colors and sort of the same shapes. Like, it wouldn't be smart to do this one in all squares and this one in all circles. But if there's much more, or the circles are more emphasized on this one than on this one, that's of course fine. Like I said, the color is mostly going to tie it together, and then just not reinventing things on the shapes from one to another should make them look like a set. Okay, so another key detail of composition number 2 is that it must achieve balance, and note, this is not easy. It takes some work. So one visual that often helps people is to think of this composition on a pendulum, and visually you want similar amounts of weight on each side. And just as important is the balance is the visual interest. So you want to try not to equally distribute objects of equal sizes. So you want to use scale change, you want to use your knowledge of hierarchy, which will be the subject of our next video, and try to make very interesting compositions.